Who's excited for season 2 of The Last of Us? It is coming out this Sunday, and well, I don't know, man. It's interesting, right? Because this right here, from a certain point of view, nobody is really talking about this, or at least if they're talking about it, they're not looking forward to it, because that's people that I listen to that are familiar, obviously, with the source material that they're going to be adapting, and from some early reviews, they're going to be somewhat faithful to it. So it's going to be interesting to try to deduce how long before Ellie and Joel head off for a golfing excursion. But I suppose we'll have to piece that together. But while the first season did relatively well, okay, from what I can recall, like it was getting 8, 9, 10 million viewers. Like it was doing well on traditional HBO with normies out there. And then it was also streaming well. And the people that stuck with it, if they could just get past the whole, oh, there's a gay episode in Tree. But it ended up being, from the people that watched the series, one of the best and the best reviewed and best acted, and just overall, the standout episode of the season. Like all of that goodwill, you also have to put it in the, like there's so much stuff going against this season of television, which I'm not rooting for, but also I'm not really rooting against, okay? Because The Last of Us as an IP is super dead to me at this point in time. Like I said before, I like the first game. I played through it and I really enjoyed the story that was there. I thought the gameplay was clunky and trash, and Naughty Dog has done 1,000 times better, but that ended up being the high water mark that they would never eclipse in the years since. But that was all the way back in 2013 at this point in time. But I digress. When season 1 aired, remember, that was at the beginning. That was February of 2022. So we're 3 years on, man. And as HBO figured out last year with House of the Dragon, you take that long for a show to come back, regardless of quality. And there was a lot of hype coming off of the first season of House of the Dragon. But that came out in the summer of 2022, and season 2 came out in the summer of 24. And you just had a drop off right there, because that is way too long to be waiting for new seasons of television. So for this to be 3 years on, I don't really know. And it's also become patently obvious for a bunch of normies out there that there's a considerable amount of people that are just kind of done with Pedro Pascal. So they see his dumb overacting face over the top of this, and they're like, I kind of liked it, but I don't really remember what went on, so I'd have to go back and watch it. And it's, I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it, maybe I won't. I'll be interested to see, because I think it's probably going to view well. I think it's going to do pretty well for a while, except there's going to be one consequential episode that is either going to turn people off, or if they handle it better than they did in the source material, well, it might end up ingratiating them to the other characters that apparently take the front seat and are really in the driver's seat, which kind of makes me think that they're going to be stretching out certain events, because, okay, season 2, this is just high level, not really spoilers, but it's just going to let you know what they're going to be covering. They split the second game into 2 seasons. So the first half of The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be season 2, and of course, you know how that ends up working. The second half is going to be season 3 whenever that comes around. I don't know if they're filming. Obviously, they have the material, and it's not like Naughty Dog is working on anything else of consequence outside of their stupid, Isn't Christianity Bad simulator? Because they released the only other round they had in the chamber, and we'll get to that very shortly. But as I have this pulled up right here, okay, just the review aggregator ahead of release, and all of the critics love it, okay? You could take a look at the reviews that are right there. 92% from top critics, 92% from all critics, and everybody loves it. Oh my god. Season 2 is a huge improvement on the first season in terms of pacing, but Neil Druckmann still makes some very questionable decisions in adapting the second game. Final result of the show that can't escape the shadow of its better source material. Interesting. Okay, so it's better paced than the first season, which I guess, well, honestly, making the first game 1 season, you did yourself a grave disservice, but this is Neil Druckmann, who's, in charge of the writing of this, and he considers the first game a stepping stone to his magnum opus that is the second. So that right there sticks out, but we'll come back to the discussing film review, because I think that one's pretty important. Okay, then you got Vanity Fair, gives it a rotten score. Oh, interesting. Suspense and intrigue abound, and there's a new run of episodes that feels too much like a mere dystopian survival adventure. Well, that was also some of the more substantive critique outside of Bella Ramsey's ugly and she can't act, and the game is and the show is woke because Joel gets pushed around. Yeah, it's just overall too grim, and there's not a lot of chemistry between the two leads. That was more or less the actual criticism that's out there. But anyways, but yes, much of the grace, nuance, and texture of The Last of Us first go round is missing. Ooh, I'm starting to pick up on something here. Okay, the pacing. Okay, you know, huge improvement on the first season's pacing. Okay, so you're gonna be stretching some stuff out. Much of the grace, nuance, and texture. Okay, I kind of see what's going on here. Season belongs to Ramsey, who gets to take Ellie to dark places that non-game fans won't be expecting. I don't think they're going to be waiting until the end of the season, okay, based on a couple of these reviews right here, before we get the Joel in one. And like I said, okay, going back to the discussing film review, it's actually worse than the little snippet that was right there. I was reading a little bit of this, and it's like, oh, very interesting. The release of HBO's The Last of Us was a landmark moment in live-action video game adaptations after decades of doomed studio attempts, whereas recent TV shows like Halo on Paramount Plus and Twisted Metal, which I heard was alright, failed to make an impression for the dedicated fan bases. Yeah, because how do you adapt Twisted Metal for a TV show? And like, how do you adapt a Minecraft story for a movie? Oh, very poorly, and then it's going to make $1 billion. I want to die. Twisted Metal is getting a second season. Halo got canceled after its second, but it's also going on Peacock, so it doesn't really say all that much. Not exactly a streaming service that is known for quality or really anything standing out. The HBO original series in question made new fans out of, a general audience on top of appealing to pre-established players of Naughty Dog games. Arguably, the success of The Last of Us Season 1 paved the way for other shows like Fallout. Oh, Christ almighty. Hopefully when Season 2 runs around on that one, people start to go, wow, this is really stupid. And you know what? Actually, Season 1 wasn't as great as we thought it was. And Like a Dragon Yakuza on Prime Video. That's a series that just came and went, and nobody talked about it at all whatsoever. That's wild. To more easily build their own audiences, since people are now growing a stronger appetite for prestigious video game adaptations on television. No, we're just asking for good ones. It's not that hard, but no. More prestigious, yes. Yes, we all need to sit around and discuss the nuance about how the cycle of violence needs to be stopped, and how do you go about doing that, because violence just simply begets violence, and Neil Druckmann just go to hell. Speaking of which, he's a creative director of the games and head of Naughty Dog Studios and showrunner Craig Mazin, yes, of Chernobyl. How could you make something so great and be attached to this project? Whatever. Have it now returned after 2 years with a stacked ensemble cast to adapt the critically acclaimed yet massively controversial second game of the franchise, Last of Us Part 2. Yes, with the promise of a third season and an opportunity to revisit divisive source material. Last of Us Season 2 on HBO has a uniquely high bar to clear, but does it succeed? Yes, like the story's thematic moral questions. Yeah, like why would you want to get revenge on somebody who caved in your surrogate father's head with a golf club? Why would you want to do that? Why would you hunt her down to the ends of the earth only to just simply let her go because we're not so different, you and I? The answer is much more complex than a simple yes or no. So is it good? I don't know, man. It's pretty complex. Revisiting the messiness of Last of Us Season 1? What? Like, it was pretty straightforward, my guy. Now, the HBO series is still burdened by the existence of the same story told better in another medium. Oh, so it's another bad adaptation, but we can't say that right now because Ellie and Dina's romance takes center stage. Oh, please have bigot sandwiches. I beg you, please. At least, like, if it's going to be just a maudlin, self-important, self-aggrandizing schlock, it'll at least have a couple of good memes on that one, which I beg you, please. Last of Us Season 2 is shorter, with it being 7 episodes. Holy shit. However, this choice to adapt only the first half of The Last of Us Part 2 instead of trying to stuff it with one season pays off in allowing the world to breathe. Oh yeah, that's definitely what we want from this atrocious story. So we're gonna have to wait until Season 3 to see Fat Geralt. That sucks. Last of Us Season 2 is saved by the ensemble cast. Oh, what? Pedro Pascal continues to ground Joel in a different direction. Yeah, okay. Then Troy Baker's original, memorable performance. But yeah, it's different. And that's why, the whole adaptation argument, like if you're telling a little bit of a different story and you're trying to take the characters in different directions, I understand. I'm not going to get too upset about that, but like, Joel was really good in the first game. Can't really say too much about his, rapid onset dementia that he exhibited in the first 30 minutes of the second game, highlighting a sensitive and emotional torment within the character. Meanwhile, Isabella Merced just shines as Dina. She's bubbly, loyal, and immediately likable. Oh, so so you're really going well off the source material, if that's the case. Abby Anderson. I just called her Abby Steiner, played by Catelyn Dever. Is also introduced this season with a little screen time. Yeah, she immediately establishes herself as a force of nature, right? Yeah, by just flexing her biceps. All right, that's not important this time around. But yes, to just hop around to the end of the review, The Last of Us Season 2 is about Ellie growing up and realizing her relationship with her parental figure is a lot more complicated than she thought. I think he's going to get clubbed in the third episode. Okay, it's seeming very, very likely that that's the case. Just like Ellie herself, Neil Druckmann's sophomore venture into TV has its own growing pains. 3.5 stars from one of these shill outlets like Disgusting Film. You might as well consider that like a 4 or like a 3.5 on a proper 10-point scale. It's gonna be interesting, man. It's going to be interesting because if you're just reading between the lines where, Ellie, she's going out there and she's hanging out with, is that supposed to be Tommy? Maybe it is. I'm not entirely sure, but you're going to be focusing on Dina and, Abby. Oh, she gets introduced and it's going to be great. And hey, Joel has a guitar. That's going to be fun for a bunch of flashbacks I'd imagine that we're doing. But yeah, if this all has to hinge on the talents of Bella Ramsey's autistic head, no, that's not a joke. She got diagnosed because she exhibited the symptoms on set, and a brave cast member finally came forward and it's like, are you kind of retarded? So you should go get that tested. And lo and behold, she was. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure how popular this is going to be. I think it's probably going to do good. I just don't know if, like the first season, like the audience would continue to grow, because The Last of Us Part 1 was a very good story, whereas The Last of Us, Part 2, if they follow the source material and they follow the story from the game, there's not going to be a lot of incentive to just carry on with that story, which is why, ahead of the release of this game, one of the only bellwethers that you can go ahead and use to figure out if this season of television is going to be a success or not is to just take a look at the most recent re-release of Last of Us Part 2, as it finally got a PC release. And this is a little bit of a misnomer or an uncharitable comparison, but yeah, The Last of Us Part 2 performs worse than God of War Ragnarok, and that implies that it would do better than a lot of other modern releases, but no, not at all whatsoever. It was not good, and Ragnarok, doubled it up? Anyways, in its first weekend of release on Steam, Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered performed worse than Ragnarok, as well as the release of The Last of Us. Yeah, exactly. On Sunday, April 6th, yes, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered hit a peak concurrent player count of 30,690 players. Yup. What a smashing success. But I thought that this is one of the most beloved games from one of the most beloved franchises in all of Sony's library. Why didn't it do better? It's worse than the player count from the original Last of Us, which hit a peak concurrent player count of 36,496 players when it released, a couple of years ago, March 27th, 2023. What would that have been? Just after the game? Or I'm sorry, just after Season 1 released, I think? It's also worse than Sony's recently released God of War Ragnarok on Steam, which, 35,615 players. Not great. Not great at all. I guess I was comparing it to God of War 2018 when it hit on Steam, because, that fell off hard. On a positive note, it did beat Spider-Man 2, that's kind of wild. Kind of shows you the drop-off when it comes to that, because Spider-Man 1 was a massive hit, and, Spider-Man 2 had the, deaf black girl spray painting sections and just a relatively short campaign. These numbers come almost exactly a month after Druckmann told Variety that, yes, players should not bet on a third installment to The Last of Us, and they also, especially after Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet, shouldn't anticipate Naughty Dog continuing in any form or fashion. But hey, maybe it'll be good enough and you'll be able to hoodwink enough Hollywood executives. Maybe you rubbed elbows and buttered up enough executives to go ahead and get that adapted into an HBO series that'll just go ahead and die in a second season. It'll be fun to see, and I'll be paying attention to it, even if a lot of other people really don't give a shit about it moving forward. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I'm Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.